All right, hey everybody. Wanted to make another video about secondary function and chromaticism. This time talking about the concept of having a 5 of something, right? So that secondary dominant, the 5 chord that's working in another key, like that sort of time warp thing that I was talking about. But now, specifically looking at it just as 5 of anything. If you've done the homework up to this point, you've probably noticed that what we're looking at so far is 5s of 5. And that secondary function only applying to the 5 chord in a key. Now we're going to look at the possibility that it could be 5 of anything. And I have said, mentioned this in videos in the past already, like the sticks one, right? I showed you a 5 of 6. Just wanted to kind of dive into that concept. Quick note though, this will assume that you've seen the other videos in the series so far. So if you haven't watched those chromaticism videos, just go back and check those out. And make sure you watch those because we're going to whip through the introductory concepts here really fast just to get to the good stuff, right? The meaty new material. So secondary function of anything, right? So really quickly, what do you do when you see chromaticism, right? So first thing is you don't panic. Again, sort of benign right now, right? When you only have like a 5 of 5 or something. But again, there will be a moment when you're looking at some Brahms and the first thing you're going to want to do is lie down on the ground, right? Because there's going to be accidentals everywhere and it's going to be crazy looking. Don't panic. There's logic to it. For this stuff, for our chromaticism right now, the first thing you want to do, take a deep breath, skip the chord. Okay, if it's in context, if you're looking at a score or something like that, look at where it went. Where did it go, right? Because this stuff, and I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but the things that we're looking at, these secondary functions, they're what's called functional chromaticism. They are doing something, right? They're making the harmony go somewhere. They're applying themselves. In fact, that's a word sometimes that people use for this type of chromaticism. They're called applied chords. They're applying themselves to another chord. So one way to understand what that chord is, the one in question, right, the chromatic chord, is to figure out where it applies itself to, right? Because that'll give you a lot of hints. So you skip it, right? Where did it go? Does the chromaticism, quote unquote, make sense in the key of the root of the chord it went to? So, if you're in the key of C and you see a chord that's D, F sharp, A, and C, well, that F sharp, right, is the chromatic chord because there's no F sharp in the key of C. But then you look, hey, it went to a G chord. Well, does F sharp make sense in the key of G? Yeah, right? That's the accidental, right? That is the key signature of G. So that chord would be in G, and we'd call that a 5/7 of 5. And again, that's what we talked about in the first two videos. So if that's new to you, just make sure you go back and check those out. Yeah, so if that works, then you've got a secondary dominant. If it doesn't, and if you watch the video on the Louis Armstrong, What a Wonderful World, there's a couple in there. I kind of paused and I went through the whole thought process, and we come up with these chords that don't work. And that just means they're not secondary dominants. They're a different type of chromaticism that you'll start to encounter as you move further and further through analysis. Okay, so secondary dominance, right? The chromaticism that emphasizes a certain chord in your key by acting as a dominant, a 5 chord, right, in a different key. They create emphasis, and a word I've used a lot is like magnetism. They create color. That's what chromaticism or chroma means, right? They kind of spice it up. They make something sound more interesting. They're the drama. Those moments often when there's just a little bit of, spice to the music. That's because there's accidentals, and it's creating balance from the diatonicism. Until now, all of your homework has been concerned with 5s of 5, right? It's this idea that you have a secondary dominant of something of 5. Well, really, it doesn't have to work like that, right? You can have 5 of X, where X can be anything that can be a key. This is just a good way to think about it. You're tonicizing something. It's another word I've used a few times, right? You're not modulating. We're not going to another key, but we're tonicizing a key. The thing under the slash, the X here, that should be something that is possible to be a key of, if that makes sense. I'm ending with a preposition there, so it's not great English, but so your options, right, if that's logical, would be 5 of 2, because, and let's just think in the key of C here for a second. Your 5 of 2, that would be D minor, right? D minor is a key, so you could have a 5 of 2. Your 5 of 3, well, 3 in C would be E minor, and E minor is a key, so you could have a 5 of 3. And 5 of 6, well, 6 is A minor, right? So that could be it. 5 of 4, 4 is an F major chord, so that'd be F major, and that'd be fine. 5 of 5 obviously has worked because that's what we've done before. Conspicuously, one that's missing is the 7 diminished chord. Didn't talk about that one. You will not likely see that, and you won't, like, explicitly, I'm telling you now on our homework as we're kind of working through this stuff and learning the principles, you will not see that. So you won't have like a 5 of 7 diminished, because there's no key of 7 diminished, right? If you think in the key of C, right, that's B diminished. Is there a key of B diminished? Well, I mean, technically, I guess, if you start talking about like synthetic scales, like octatonic scales and stuff like that, sure. Yes, you can talk about like a Locrian scale or something, sure. Like you can get some really interesting things, but in our diatonicism, chromaticism world of functional Western music, it doesn't exist. So it's unlikely that you'll see it. However, leaving the caveat there, it's possible, right? And that means you'll probably see it maybe as part of what we'll identify as a sequence pattern, and that's coming down the pipeline when we start looking at those later. Okay, so let's think through the thought process, which mercifully is exactly the same. It's just now you're going to have more options of things to write. So let's kind of zoom in. We got a 5 of 6 here in the key of D. Okay, so these are out of context, right? This is an abstraction. This is just a moment in time we're trying to create. A 5 of 6 in D. Well, your first thing is, well, we're not in D, right? We've got this key signature for D, but this chord that we're constructing is working against that, right? It's a chromatic moment. So you have to think, okay, the 2 sharps are fighting against us, right? You have to add some things to it. We're going to be adding chromaticism, adding accidentals. So you think, okay, we're in D, but we're not. We're thinking the 5 of the 6. Well, the first thing is, what is the 6? So you think in your D major scale, right? D, E, F sharp, G, A, B. B. Cool. So we're in the key of B. And if you remember from the previous videos, we're in the key of B. And I just said, like, you can think in B major. It doesn't matter that this chord here is minor. You can just say in the key of B, like think in B major. And that works, and this is really important, that works for 5s of X, for 5 of 5, 5 of 6, 5 of 4. You can think, oh, 6 is B, think in B major, let's build our chord in B major. That's going to change when you get to secondary leading tone chords, so like 7 of this. Okay, that's just a heads up that, you know, when we look at those things in a couple, maybe a week or so or 2 weeks, just know that that will change and you'll have to kind of differentiate. Okay, so we're thinking in B, what is the 5, right? So you're thinking, okay, B. In the key of B, 5 is F sharp, right? So you're building here, really, we're just spelling this over there. Key of B, build the 5 chord. So think in the key of B, B major is fat cats go down alleys, right? It's 5 sharps. Fat cats go down alleys. There you go. It's really messy, but 5 sharps. So we're building up F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, and that's it. It's only a triad, right? So just a 5. That's the chord, F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, we have to write over here. Okay, it's in root position, so you can voice this however you want. F sharp, notice, again, it's in the key signature, so you don't need an accidental. I'm never going to mark it wrong if you write it in, but it's just not necessary. F sharp, we can put our C sharp in. Again, in the key signature, don't have to write it in, but I'm just writing it in to be safe. Erase this just a little bit, give myself some room. F sharp, let's double the root, that, and then we have A sharp. That's the chromatic note, right? So again, if you saw this in like actual music, this is what the chord would look like. F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, A sharp, with that bit of chromaticism. Because that's the 5 in the key of B, which is 6 in the key of D. Okay, let's try another one. And really important to note right now also, this thought process, all I care about when you're learning this is that your like algorithm is solid, that you understand the thought process. This could take you a minute, 2 minutes, that's fine. Like to think it through, totally fine. You don't have to be fast at it. Eventually you want to be able to look at an F sharp chord in the key of D and think, oh cool, it's a chromatic chord in B. Right? And you'll be able to do that. It's just, you got to do like 500 of them. So it takes time. Don't get frustrated if I'm going through this quickly. Part of that is to, you know, understand that you have a video and you can pause it and just sort of think about it and take your time. And again, don't get frustrated. Fluency is the last thing we want, or speed is the last thing we want. Okay, let's look at one more. We're in the key of E. So we're in E minor, okay? But we're not. Right? We're in the key of, what is 3 in the key of E? So think it. What's 3 in the key of E? That is G, right? Cool. So now we're in the key of G. What is 5 in the key of G? D, right? So we're writing a chord built on D. So again, looking over here, here's our napkin math. We're in the key of G, which is 1 sharp, and we're writing 5, right? So what does that look like? Well, that would be D, F sharp, and A, right? And you can go over here, and you can spell that. And you get this. There's the D, because it's in root position. And again, I'm just voicing it however, D, A, F sharp, and D. Okay, that's your chord. So, what is interesting here? Using your curious analytical brains, right? What's interesting about this chord? Well, the interesting thing is this is correct, right? But what's different is there are no accidentals. Or are they? Or are there? There are accidentals, right? Because think about this, and this is from way back when you first started theory, right? This is why I always harp on this. We're in E. We're thinking about harmony because we're thinking about something vertical, right? When you think about vertical harmony, the most logical thing you want to have is harmonic minor, which is you're going to have that leading tone function. If this chord were diatonic, it would have 2 sharps here because those are the leading tones, right? Because we're thinking E harmonic minor, which is E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D sharp. You got to raise the leading tone, right? This chord is chromatic now because that is gone. So this actually has an accidental because D natural is, kind of an accidental, right? Because we're moving away from the concept of harmonic minor for this chord. Okay, so this is really cool. This is your one secondary dominant you will have that looks like it's a diatonic chord. Important to note here, and this is something we will dig into as we start to see more and more chords like this in context. This chord, I'm telling you right now, just kind of arbitrarily, is a 5 of 3. Okay, that's the 5 of the 3. It's a 5 of G in the key of E minor. However, this chord in context, so if we saw this like in the wild, right, out in a piece of music, this chord also looks like this. It looks like 7, like a major chord built on scale degree 7. Both of these are correct. And they're correct based on what they do. Okay? So follow me on this. A 5 of 3 is correct, and it's the correct way to analyze this chord if this chord goes to 3. Right? If the next chord, say we're looking at music, is a G chord, that would be the most right answer, is to call this a 5 of 3 because you're calling it what you're hearing and you're calling it what you're seeing. However, there's a very valid and normal place for this chord to not do that. If this chord was a D major chord here, and then the next chord was 1, say it does something like that, right? And it resolves to minor 1. Well, then what it does is this chord is not functioning like a 5 of 3. It's functioning like a 7. It's functioning like a dominant chord moving to tonic. So you would call it 7. Right? It's a dominant function chord then. And this is where things get really interesting, right? You have to look at what they're doing and then kind of listen to what they're doing and make a call. They're both objectively correct, like looking at them as just analyzing this out of context, but they're going to be very different when you look at them in context. This is way more common. This like that is way more common in classicism. You'll see this a lot, or in folk music. You'll have a 5 of 3 a lot of times to modulate to the relative major, and we'll look at these in context in another video. In like Van Halen or something, you're going to see this chord all the time because it's like a power chord if you've played guitar at all. Like the end of Super Mario Brothers, the Victory Cadence, I think is what people call it, is 6-7-1. It's these major chords like rising up by whole steps. And this then would be that chord. It'd be the major 7 because it's moving to 1. Okay? Things start to get interesting now because there is subjectivity, right? It kind of is not like, oh, that is what it is. It's always going to be that thing. You sort of have to look at the context and think about it in a broader sense. All right. So in another video, we'll look at these in context. And again, we'll talk about this more, like that 7 versus 5 of 3, as it comes up as we're analyzing music.